Welcome back. This is the last day, day 10 in our marriage communication workshop. And I have to tell you that I have been saving this for the end very specifically because we needed all of the communication tools and skills and exercise that we've been practicing these last 2 weeks. We need them today, very specifically. As we talk about how to have a difficult conversation, it's important to just know that difficult conversations come in every marriage, in every relationship. And listen, they're not always about our marriage. So I don't know. I can base this off of my husband, base it off of the women that I mentor and counsel with their marriage, and can say, by and large, men tend to avoid difficult conversations, hard conversations, deep conversations. It just kind of sends them out of their depths in so many ways. I know in our home, in our marriage, my husband has talked with me about this, and we've talked to marriage counselors about this, and I know that he feels very verbally outmatched. And so when a difficult topic comes up in our lives that we have to talk about, whether it has anything to do with him or not, and he would rather clean the gutters than sit down and have a conversation with me about our taxes. Okay, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just this flight, that fight or flight. My man will fly. Some men will fight, like they don't want to talk about this, and so instead of talking about this hard thing, they will pick a fight with you about something where they know they can win. Okay, it kind of goes one way or the other, and I'm sure there are a lot of men that fall in the middle. I hate to overgeneralize things, but the reality is we know our men can behave this particular way, right? So what do we do? Because we have to have real conversations. We can be playful and we can redirect, we can, kind of flirt, we can try to, speak words of respect and kind of keep our mouth shut about some things. But there comes a time where we have to talk about it. And I'm going to say that it's not as often as it used to be in our home, and not because there's any lack of difficult things to talk about, but because of the first 5 pieces we covered. So you remember in our first week, we talked about, I'm going to own my part. Do I have a part in this? Even if it does not have anything to do with me, I probably have some part in it. For example, I'm very upset that he's doing this, and I have to look in and say, you know what? I have some self-righteousness going on there. I'm feeling maybe I have not forgiven him about something, and God is showing me that I've got to walk in purity there, purity of heart and mind, and forgive and let God handle that. Just let it go to him. And so if I have some things stirring around in me related to this issue or this topic, then I have a part, because if I haven't dealt with the things that are between God and I, that's going to affect my prayer life. That's going to affect my ability to stand on the rock and fight for my marriage. Okay. Then I have to ask myself, have I accepted my husband? Have I set aside the expectations? Have I taken those expectations to God? Is this difficult thing we need to talk about? Does it have to do with an unmet need or expectation in me that I need to take to God and work through that piece? Really, like, give it some face time, me and God, thinking it through. Sometimes I'll just walk the neighborhood. We live in this circle, and so I just walk around and around, praying it out. God, is this something legitimately that needs to be discussed, or is this something that I need to be patient about and wait on you about and give to you today? And then we're going to look at, our thoughts. Okay, what were my thoughts in this moment, in this difficult thing I feel like needs to be talked about? Okay, are they line up with that Philippians 4:8 test? Are they negative thoughts? I got to get those thoughts in order, get them lined up with the Word of God. And then, have I covered this in prayer? Have I created a prayer strategy around this? Because a lot of times these difficult conversations, they're about things that come up over and over and over about. I know there are areas that are a struggle in my life with my kids, in our life with our job, in our situation with our home or our finances, a sin issue or a character issue in my husband that we've committed, right? We're going to be effective prayer warriors, battling for our marriage, covering our husband in prayer. Have I done that? Or have I spent a lot of time kind of worrying about it, talking to my girlfriends about it, maybe like a breath prayer, God help him, God change him, God fix this? Or have I really dug into the Word of God, found the pieces that can be taken into battle, and have I spent some time on my knees about this issue with my husband? So those are my like pre-conversation checks, okay? Checklist, check this off, check this off, check this off, okay? I've dealt with my part. I'm trying to accept him. It's hard, but I'm working on it. I know I'm like surrendering the thing to God over and over. Yes, there are still some crazy negative thoughts, but I am surrendering those to God. I've been doing that for a while. I see improvement. And I am praying over this. This is a hard thing in our life. This is a hard thing in my marriage. Or sometimes I haven't been praying, but this caught me by surprise. I'm going to find a verse or two and start adding that into my prayer list. For the most part, hard conversations don't have to happen right this second. It feels like it, right? It feels like, oh my gosh, this is big, and we have to deal with this right now. If I don't talk, I'm going to explode if I don't talk about this. But I want to say, take the time to pray over it for a couple of reasons. Okay, so we're going to start in the book of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 28. And he said, Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." When we pause, really pause, okay, and take this issue to God. So let's say it is something that is just so heavy. So we have a young daughter who has some special needs, and there are challenges with that come up, okay? And it could be the same. Honestly, any parenting thing can be stressful. You don't need like extra letters at the end of their name for parenting to be hard. Maybe we have, a child who is lying, or a child who is stealing, or a child who is like this crazy eye roll, slam the door, disrespect, all of this, that can come up in our parenting, where we need to sit down, my husband and I, and talk about a strategy for parenting, for overcoming this challenge, for being on the same team, for doing this. This is a difficult conversation that will send my husband to Walmart for hours just to get away from the house, so we don't have to talk about it. Am I the only one? But what I see here is that Jesus wants to come in and take that load. He wants us praying over the issue, not just praying over my husband, but praying over my kids, praying over our parenting, praying over their future. There are a couple of really good prayer guides that I love to go through. So Stormy O'Martin, the one who does the Power of a Praying Wife, that I still go through every month praying over for my husband. She has one that's the Power of a Praying Parent. Same philosophy of praying scripture over the areas in your children's lives. But then I know, just like you do, your children so much better than other people do, and there are special things that come up. I have to pray over my youngest daughter's health, and over her mental health, and over some of the things that come up in our lives that will hit all of her things where she is just going to erupt and cause chaos in the house. My older daughter has a spirit of fear. It covers her, and I have to pray over that all the time, that she will not be anxious and fearful about things. Do you know what I mean? These are situations that happen in life that are affecting our whole family that we have to talk about. We do. We have to talk about our parenting strategy. We have to tweak things and work on things and get on the same page. And it's hard because I'm like, oh, I'm here. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm here all the time with them, and I know what's going on, and he's out at work doing the thing, and like we just need to get on the same page. And he doesn't always want to because it's hard. Not that he runs from hard, but parenting is challenging regardless, you know? So when I see in Matthew that I can come to Jesus and really give him this hard thing, and he will take that yoke, he will teach me how to do this so that there's rest for my soul. I love that. So I cannot overemphasize enough how much time we need to spend in prayer. How much time we need to spend in prayer, especially if we've had these difficult conversations in the past and they've gone badly, right? Have you had that where you're like, your daughter is always doing this, and I've heard from your mom that you always did that, and so she is just like you. Would you help me? Like, you know what I mean? Like those difficult conversations that shut him down. That made him put up like this wall between us, because now all of a sudden we're in a fight that really didn't start with anything he did wrong. It started with my heart not being in check. It started with an overflow of emotions, reacting quickly instead of putting a pause on the issue to really take the time to pray over it, to cover it in prayer so that we could respond with wisdom. And I want to pause there for a minute because, and you probably know this, but maybe you don't. Did you know that we can come to God and say, like, this is a hard thing in our life and I need wisdom. I need to know what to do, what to say. What's the next step? Will you help me? And he promises that he will. And I'm going to read that to you. It's in the book of James, chapter 1. So chapter 1, verse 5, it says, if anyone needs wisdom, ask your generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. I think a lot of times we feel like we have to have all the answers. We have to have it together. We have to know the next thing, but we don't. We really don't. And we don't have to fake it either. It's not like a fake it till you make it thing. We can pray and ask, God, give me the wisdom to know how to parent this child. Give me the wisdom to know what to do about our finances and how to have that conversation together as a couple in a way that's not going to lead to an argument, that's not going to make him shut down, that's not going to mess up our marriage. We had in this past summer kind of a health crisis. My health is just in a weird place. And one of the doctors said it might be cancer. And that became a difficult conversation. And every time I would try to talk to him about it, he just like shut down, walked away. He didn't want any part of that conversation. And no wonder, right? Because I was speaking from an overflow of my emotions, like wild, crazy emotions. And it was hitting him and all of his pride things. He couldn't fix it. All of his emotion things. He was scared. And we both had to agree to spend some time praying about that before we could come together and talk and make a plan and really work through the hard parts. But it required prayer. If you are married to a believer and in a situation where you're still communicating and there's this hard thing and you try to talk about it and it has ended badly, it's okay to have like a conversation about the conversation, a pre-conversation conversation to be like, you know what, babe, this is going to be a hard talk. It's hard for me to think about it. It hasn't worked very well in the past. Could we agree to just both be praying about it? We don't have to pray about it together. If your husband is not one who likes to pray with you, as wonderful as that sounds, like let's pray about this together. And some of you have got that kind of man, and whew, rock on. That is amazing. I don't have that kind of man, but I have the kind of man who will pray about it on his own. And so I can say, you know what, this is an issue in our life right now. Not specifically to our marriage, but it's going to affect our marriage if we don't talk about it. And we haven't done so well with this topic before. Could we pray about it for a couple of days and come back together and have a conversation? and things go so much more smoothly then. They just do. And so another piece I would like to say is, as long as we are talking about things that are not specific to sin in his life, and we're going to get to that in a minute, but these are just life things, okay? So let's say, I remember about a decade ago, we were having trouble in the church we were in. There were some things there, and I was feeling like we needed to leave. And he was kind of feeling that way too, but he was a new believer. He had been baptized in that church. And so anytime the conversation came up, he was just immediately defensive and upset. And I'm like, man, we need to talk this through and make a decision. Just giving him a heads up that the conversation is coming, that it's, and I will like overemphasize to him, you've done nothing wrong. Which is a horrible testimony to who I was as his wife, that he would immediately think he had done something wrong. He was going to be in for it. He might just go for a 3-day hike just to get out of the house so that we didn't have to have the conversation. But I can assure him that this is not about him. This is not about us even. It's just a hard thing in our lives that we need to talk about. And could we just be praying about that and thinking about that so we both come to the conversation prepared? A few months ago, I shared with you all our kind of like conversation guide for setting goals as a couple. That is another big thing that can be a difficult conversation in marriage. And I find that if he knows what we're going to talk about in advance, if he can kind of think it through on his own, be prepared for it, know what the questions are, have some sort of answers thought through when we come together, it is going to be a better conversation. He is going to not feel outmatched because, you know, especially like goals and things like that, like we've been thinking about it. I've been setting goals since I was a little girl. I know what I want my 10-year plan to look like. I know what our finances should look like. I know what I want here and here and here. And for the most part, he's not thinking about that. He's thinking about, you know, the Super Bowl. He's thinking about March Madness. He's thinking about his job and all the responsibilities there. He's not thinking about 10 years down the road and our financial plan. So to give him an idea it's coming and say, you know, let's talk about this and let's like set a date on the calendar, get a sitter, go out of the house and sit down and really talk through these things. It can be such a help to make that conversation not difficult, fun even in so many ways. So as you're in those situations, even when you've prayed about it, even when you've given him a heads up about it, lots of time maybe praying about it separately, when the conversation comes, there can still be this like, oh, and it's hard to talk about. In the middle of the conversation, like emotions are going to stir, things are going to come up. And so it's important to have been practicing our communication tools, to have been practicing guarding my mouth, listening way more than I'm talking so that I'm not going to react badly out of emotion, having kind of played through the conversation yourself in front of a mirror, right? I just like, honestly, so that, you know, he kind of reacts this way. And so you can imagine what he might say and imagine how you're going to respond differently. Kind of, you think of like a counselor might say, that is interesting. I'm going to think about that for a minute, just to give yourself a pause so you can think about that and think about how to respond better. Thinking about how to add some playfulness into the conversation. Even a difficult conversation does not have to be like emotional and draining and dramatic. It can be a little bit of fun added in, a little bit of playfulness, a little bit of femininity, okay? And we're going to hit the femininity part at the end because I know that is like a challenging concept, right? We kind of like buck back at that. I don't need to be feminine. I can't see myself playing the part of a little girl. But man, it does so much to diffuse the tension and to stir that chivalrous man that is like asleep inside of him. So even if you're thinking all of these tools are so interesting, but that one, I'm just going to chuck that one. First of all, let me say, they are all optional. They're all something like pick the ones that work for you. But try this one, at least try it. Don't just chuck it without ever having tried it and seen the effect it will have on your man, because it could be pretty amazing in your world. Okay, and then as you're having the conversation, be very intentional to not use those toxic words, right? To not add in a you always, you never, you should, because it can cause what should not have been an argument to very quickly become an argument. Those words will, if he says them or if I say them, they will cause a fight in 2 seconds flat. And so we're going to be practicing with our I statements. Man, when this happened with her the other day, it made me, I felt powerless. And I just really need to know what kind of a strategy we could make together to make this better in the future. Okay, not like she always does this and it's just like you always used to do. And what did your mom do? Do you know what I mean? Like that will cause a fight. That is taking the conversation to a bad level. We don't want to do that. And if we accidentally do it because it's habit, we want to backpedal really quick and be like, babe, I'm so sorry. I don't know where that came from. I've been trying so hard to just chuck those words and they just slipped out. Can you forgive me? And just be vulnerable. Be very feminine natured in this way, to admit our mistake very quickly, to ask for forgiveness. And I will say, like, not just I'm sorry, add a will you forgive me into the equation. Practice with that phrase because that softens his heart so much. Really, it would all of us, right? Don't we all want that as an option? And I feel like we do it with our kids, you know, like say you're sorry, and then the other one, I forgive. But to say that out loud, will you forgive me? It shows a lot of respect. It shows a lot of, I really value you and how you feel about me, and it just is a way to diffuse that tension very quickly. So I just want to shift our time and kind of wrap up with talking about difficult conversations that are specific to our marriage. Okay. Now, anytime you've got two sinful people living together, right, we are going to have problems. His rough edges are going to rub against my rough edges, and we're just going to struggle. And there can be difficult conversations there, but a lot of times in our culture, we have a lot of other things going on. It is not uncommon to have alcoholism in a marriage, to have drug addiction in a marriage, to have pornography addiction in a marriage, to have verbal abuse in a marriage, to have physical abuse in a marriage, to have irresponsibility with finances, to have all kinds of things that wound us, okay? Things that are not okay, things that I cannot accept this. Yes, I'm trying to accept you as you are, and I accept that you are just a fellow Christian or man, and I need to give you grace, and I need to pray hard over these things, and I need to be taking my expectations to God. But when there are these other pieces, we need to have some difficult conversations about them. When he is making choices that affect our life in a very bad way, and I'm talking about abuse, I'm talking about addiction, I'm talking about just this crazy culture we live in where it's okay. I mean, we just feel like, you know, if it makes me happy, I should just do it. I would highly encourage you, if this is you, if that is your situation, you are not just in a difficult situation in marriage, you are in a difficult marriage. If there is any abuse whatsoever, I'm not telling you to stay. I'm telling you to find a good Christian counselor and talk about boundaries. I'm not saying don't fight for your marriage, because I believe that God can change a marriage miraculously through all of these things and so many more. But you have to be safe, okay? Find a good friend to talk to. Find a good body of believers to confide in, and make sure that you are safe. Make sure that you are taken care of. Make sure that you and your children are not in danger. That is big, okay? These particular communication skills, they're not going to fix an abusive husband. Lots of things can. It takes two. Okay, no amount of me being playful or feminine in my conversation will stop my husband from hitting me if he is abusive. And I wish there was like a magic formula, but that is going to require some difficult conversations that are going to end in some very firm boundaries to say, it's not okay for you to hit us. And so we are going to go, and if you get to a place where you are ready to work on our marriage, here are some steps that we can go through to talk about reconciliation. But it's going to require counseling. It's going to require a lot of dating and trust building and all of these things before we can live together again. And I'm going to put myself in a vulnerable place where you could hurt me or hurt our children again. Those kind of difficult conversations, listen, they're hard, but they are necessary if the situation is in that place. We have had several conversations like that, not about physical abuse, but we have had alcoholism in our past. We've had pornography addiction in our past. We deal with a gambling addiction, just all kinds of sin. And I take time at least once a year to check in with our marriage counselor, just me sometimes. And that's okay, because you matter. Like, I hear women so often frustrated that they can't make their husbands go to marriage counseling. And there is so much help that can come with that. But listen, if you are in a hard place and you need to talk these things through and you need wisdom and guidance about what to do about some very hard situations, and you're praying about it and you're in a body of believers and you're working on you, but this other piece over here is so bad. It's so bad. Pornography addiction, it affects everything in our marriage. It affects how I feel as a woman. It affects how he feels as a man. But I can't make him fix that. We can have some difficult conversations, but I need help to set firm boundaries, realistic boundaries, to know even what those should be. And so going to talk to a marriage counselor just as the wife, that is so helpful for me. It lets me talk about things to an uninvolved third party who deals with these kind of things all the time and can say, this could help you, this could help you, let's make a plan, let's make a path, let's, talk and address these things head on. At this point, when we go in and they're just checkups, she's like, wow, when you were here last time, you talked about this and this and this, and now you're saying these things are better. Like, that's amazing, let's celebrate. It can be so helpful. And I realize there are a lot of other things that could fit in this box. We just don't have a ton of time. So let's talk about, how do you have that kind of conversation? In the session today, I talked to you about our failed attempt to talk about pornography and then a successful attempt, and the difference between the two. Okay, the difference between the two is the first, who knows how many times, were just in the height of emotion. I had seen he'd cleared the browser history. That is a big red flag. He's doing something online that is embarrassing, shameful. He doesn't want me to know. Now, thankfully, we both come from this particular addiction. And so we have had good conversations in marriage counseling about setting up boundaries and knowing, so that we know when it happens. We have a password. We share our Gmail account, which is so frustrating, but because we share it, there's accountability, because I know what he's looked at and when he's cleared it. And I don't know if that's helpful for you. It's just the path that we have set down. So, in the height of those emotions, I would attack. And it would be like, you always clear the browser history when you're doing this. Have you been watching this? Like that kind of aggressive, angry, hurt situation. When the reality is, it didn't need to be handled so quickly. I needed to cover that thing in prayer. I needed to go back to God and give him this and say, God, this hurts. This hurts so deep. And I know it really has nothing to do with me, but it affects me. And I know this is his sin and his struggle, and I can't fix him. Would you please fix him? I've been praying over this. Here's my strategy. I'm going to pray through it again and give it to you and trust that you are working on him. And help me, give me wisdom for this conversation. And then I am going to call my good friend down the street and say, you know what, I need a few hours alone with my husband, and they don't have to know what it's for. And I would encourage you not to let them know what it's for, because even after you've forgiven, they might not. And so this is between us and some trusted people. I have some trusted prayer warriors in my life who know the real messy stuff, and I will go to them or send them a text and say, pornography, gambling, 7 o'clock, we're going to have this conversation. Please cover us in prayer. I will not give him a heads up about this particular thing because I would be too afraid that it will come out ugly. I'd be like, I saw what you did and we're going to talk about it, is not helpful in this situation. So I'm going to clear the house. I'm going to make sure that there are no interruptions. And listen, when he comes home and there are no kids, he knows we're having a hard conversation. That is just, that is very predictable. So the successful conversation started with some affirmation, some respect. Because here's the thing, my husband is not his sin. Okay? I want you to hear that. Even when there are hard parts, even when there are hard things that are a part of him that I can't accept, he is more than that. There are good things about this man that I can still affirm in him and still build him up in, even when we're dealing with this part that I can't. I know that he loves me, that he is trying to pursue God and to work through these issues. And I get that it's hard. It's not a sin I'm still struggling with, but you know what? I have a whole lot of other sins. I know how hard self-righteousness is to deal with. I know how hard gluttony is to deal with. I know how hard pride is to deal with. And I know that God is working on me, and I will never be perfect without sin. And so I want to cut him some slack and give him some grace when I see him working on this intentionally and say, you know what? You're a godly man. You're pursuing God in so many areas. And I know that you would never intentionally do anything to hurt me. Okay? This is a very feminine phrase. This is using my feminine wiles to stir the chivalry in him, to say, you know what, buddy, you messed up. And I know you can do better, without being a jerk about it, without being in your face, put you down. Practice some of those feminine phrases that will affirm him and respect him while still saying, but here's the standard that I expect. I expect you will be faithful to me in our marriage, that you're not going to go out and have an affair, that you're not going to have an emotional affair, you're not going to be sexting other people, you're not going to be checking out your exes on Facebook, you're not going to be watching pornography and putting that into our marriage. These are things I expect, that I have a biblical right to expect as his wife. We've talked about those things. He knows that I know he's not intentionally hurting me, but he hurt me. And this is what I saw, and this is how I feel. Not you always, and you should, and you never. Not that. This is about me in the moment. I feel this. I think this. I noticed this. Can you tell me what's going on? Can we talk about this? What happened last night? Very feminine, very soft, encouraging him to open up, not shutting him down, not being aggressive. These are just some of the tools that can help us have this conversation successfully without an argument, you know what, sometimes God's already working on him. And so there may be part of an argument that comes from it because God's working on him over here. And then he's hearing it from me. And he's like, he's going to lash out a little bit, you know, at some point. And guess what? I'm the one physically in front of him. He is smart enough to know, don't lash out at God. That's not going to end well. And so as he begins to say, you know what, I'm just struggling with this. And you know, because you've done it, you're not perfect here and all of there. And so I will say, you know what? Let's talk about this tomorrow. I will stop the conversation right there. We are getting ready to have a fight that didn't need to happen. I am not wrong. Okay? So wives, I just want to repeat this. And I know I talked about it a few days ago, but if you're not wrong and he is throwing out some bait that's raising up those emotions that can make you wrong, don't take the bait. Just step away. You know what? It could mean I'm going to go and do some grocery shopping. I'm going to get out of the house for a little bit and chill out. And I'm going to say, you know what? We need to talk about this, but we don't need to fight about this. You seem really upset, and I'm sorry, that was not what I intended. I just wanted to have a conversation about this. It hurt me, and I love you, and I love you too much to let you stay here in this situation that could hurt you and hurt our marriage. But if this is too difficult to talk about right now, we can talk about this tomorrow. Tomorrow night when you get home, we'll just start over. And that will do a couple of things, okay? So it diffuses the tension. It says, I'm not going to rise to your bait. I'm not going to let you push my buttons. I'm moving my buttons, right, ladies? We can move those buttons. We can give those buttons to God. And it does give him some more time to think through what the conversation needs to look like. We've done that so many times at this point. It is like never easy to have a difficult conversation. Some of those conversations go well, and we're talking about it, and he's opening up and doing it, and still, you know what, they end with some boundaries. They end with saying alcohol is an issue, and if that comes back into this house, you're going to have to go here and do this before we can move forward. It can end with some boundaries to say, you know what, gambling has popped up again, and that hurts our family. And so if it comes out of our bank and out of our personal resources, these are the steps that I'm going to have to take to protect our family and love you, but can't allow you to hurt our family in this way. They're hard. Those conversations, they're difficult. But it is possible to have those conversations without arguing. It is possible to have those conversations, to have them be successful, to have communicated in a way that stirred him, that brought him to the table to be a part of the conversation and a part of the solution. I just want to encourage you in this as we end our time in this workshop, just to know that you're not alone in this, that we all have to have difficult conversations. And that I'm just praying for you, and there's a community in this group that would love to be praying for you as well. As we kind of wrap up our time, I do want to tell you that I pulled these pieces out of a full Bible study. So if you get to a point where you're like, this is just not working, I'm going to tell you there really is more that would go deeper into your heart and work through some other pieces in marriage, very specifically doing marriage God's way, in a way that will help us find hope and find joy in every season. It is the 9 principles that helped us move from like on the road to divorce to a good marriage. There are still hard parts in our marriage, but it's a good marriage at this point. And it is what I use when I am teaching and coaching and mentoring other wives who are just in a difficult season. Sometimes it's so sweet, like wives who are just in a good season, they just want to make sure they're doing it God's way and honoring him. And if you're in the group, I plan to walk through that in a few months together as a group. So keep your eyes open for that. If not, you can always check it out on my page, and I will link that in today's description. We will come back to it again and talk about some other things we can do to kind of be growing in doing this marriage God's way. And until then, you all have a blessed day.